If you're in search of some cozy fall comfort food, you're going to love this slow cooker apple cider pork loin. Tender, lean pork loin is seared on the stovetop with fresh apples and onions before being cooked to juicy, tender perfection in the slow cooker with apple cider and fresh herbs. I'm Whitney from Sweet Cayenne, and once you try this apple cider pork loin, it's gonna be your go-to for easy weeknight dinners and then maybe even a fancy dinner party. You're gonna start off with a 4 to 5 pound pork loin roast. Pat that dry with a paper towel. Use a boning knife to trim any excess fat off of your pork loin roast. This fat will just get really chewy in the slow cooker, and so we want to get rid of as much as possible. Next, you'll want to season all sides of the pork loin roast with coarse kosher salt. The pork loin roast is going to rest like this in the fridge for about 8 hours. Salting the meat beforehand results in a meat that is extra tender, juicy, and flavorful, and it's something I like to do every time I cook a big cut of meat like this. Once the meat has rested overnight, we're going to season it on all sides with coarse ground black pepper. Then you're going to core and quarter 3 to 4 medium apples. I like to use Honeycrisp, Fuji, or Pink Lady for this recipe. You'll also want to quarter a medium-sized sweet onion. When everything's ready to go, you will sear your pork loin roast in a large heavy bottom pot. I like to sear mine in a mixture of olive oil and butter for the best flavor. Make sure you sear all sides of the pork loin roast to get a nice golden brown color all over it and to develop a nice fond at the bottom of the pot that will become a flavorful sauce in the slow cooker. Once the roast is seared on all sides, you'll transfer it to your slow cooker. I'm using just an average 6-quart slow cooker here, and the 5-pound roast fits perfectly into that. Next, you'll return your pot to medium heat, then add all of the quartered apples and onion pieces. We're just going to get a little bit of color on them to develop the flavor for our slow cooker sauce. Saute them for about 6 to 7 minutes until they get a little bit of nice brown color on all sides. Next, you'll add 3 cups of fresh apple cider to your hot pan using a wooden spoon to deglaze and scrape up any brown bits from the bottom of the pan. You'll bring this to a simmer before transferring it to the slow cooker. Carefully pour the apples, onions, and all the juices over the pork loin roast in the slow cooker. Add 2 dried bay leaves, a couple sprigs of fresh thyme, and 3 tablespoons of butter to the pork loin roast before putting the lid on. At this point, you'll cook your pork loin roast on low for about 2 to 3 hours until the internal temperature of the roast reaches 145 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the proper internal temperature for pork that is tender and juicy and perfectly cooked. Okay, so the pork loin is ready. It took about 3 hours to cook. So I'm just going to try and carefully as possible, remove it from the slow cooker. There we go. And set it on a cutting board to rest while we make our gravy. So you'll just want to set it on a cutting board and then cover it loosely with foil so it stays hot while the gravy is cooking. Just like that. And then now I'm just going to ladle out about 2 cups of the cooking liquid for our gravy. Now there's chunks of apple and onion in here, and you can use a strainer if you want, but I'm just going to be careful and avoid getting any of those out because we want to use those on the serving platter, but not in the gravy. We want those to be smooth. So I'm going to measure out 2 cups. I'm doing about a half a cup per measure. Okay, that looks good. And the rest of the cooking liquids we can just discard because it makes a lot of juice. So now I'm going to take this over to the oven and mix up a quick cornstarch slurry to thicken up our gravy. To make the gravy, you'll whisk together 2 tablespoons of cornstarch into half a cup of chicken or beef stock. Add that to the juices from the slow cooker and bring it to a boil. Boil it for 1 minute until it coats the back of the sauce, and then your gravy is done. Transfer it to a serving dish and we're ready to eat. To slice the pork, you can either cut it into 1/2 inch to 1 inch thick pieces depending on the portion size that you want. I like to go ahead and slice the whole pork loin roast so that we can enjoy some that night for dinner, and then I can freeze the slices in leftover gravy so that we have a nice freezer meal ready to go whenever we need it. Alright, so now I'm going to show you how I plate this up to make it look extra special. And this is such a great recipe because of the simplicity of it, but once you plate it up, it looks like something you slaved over for hours. It looks so delicious and kind of fancy. So I just like to line the pork slices up on a nice platter, just like so. This was definitely enough to feed a crowd. I will have some leftovers, as you can see. So we've got that on there, and then we're just going to use a slotted spoon to transfer some of those apples and onions from the slow cooker right down the center of the dish and then on the sides. And that way, if people don't want the apples and onions, they don't have to have them if you're serving picky eaters. I know for me, I'm an apples only type of gal. No onions for me. Oh, there's our bay leaf. And then you may have to fish out the bay leaf or some of the thyme sprigs as you're doing this. And this is delicious, served over mashed potatoes or even like whipped sweet potatoes, whipped butternut squash. And if I'm feeling really fancy, I'll make up a batch of my butternut squash risotto to serve with it. And that soaks up all the juices of these delicious apples and onions as well. At this point, you can serve it just like this, or you can do a little gravy on top, which I will do. And then, of course, put the gravy boat on the table so that people can have as much or as little as they like. Oh, it looks so good, and my mouth is totally watering right now. This makes your house smell like fall, but not the cloying, like sweet pumpkin smell, more like cozy, rich, savory, appley smell, which I just love. That looks amazing. Now let me clean up the counter a little bit and we will take a bite. This pork loin is a great recipe if you need a good dinner to take to a friend because it makes a lot, so you can make like a 4 to 5 pound pork loin and then have enough to serve your family and someone else's. The leftovers also freeze really well. You can freeze the slices of pork just in a foil pan with the gravy on top, and then just reheat it slowly in the oven after it's thawed. So it's very versatile. There's lots of different ways you can use it and dishes that you could serve it with. And it's just so cozy, just like something you would have at your grandma's house for Sunday dinner. Yes. That is so tender and juicy, and that apple cider gravy, it's just the best thing ever. Your family and friends are going to love this apple cider pork. I'm sure they're going to be requesting it all fall and winter long. I've got everything you need to make this apple cider pork loin listed in the description box below, including a printable version of the recipe. If you enjoyed this video, it would mean so much to me if you would leave a comment below and tell me what you'd like me to make next. Give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you get notifications every time I post a new video. In the meantime, now that dinner is made, let's talk about dessert. Check out my dessert playlist over here and I'll see you in the next video. I've got everything you need to make this apple cider pork